Hello everyone, my name is John Leverkuhn and I am going over my quiz app for the third project of the Grow with Google Challenge Scholarship Android Basic class on Udacity. I'm doing this, I'm terrible at making videos, and in fact I already made one, but it was 20 minutes long, so I'm going to try to condense it down as much as possible here. But it was strongly hinted that we needed to do this, and frankly I didn't get any feedback when I just posted my GitHub repository link on all the forums, and so I'm hoping that maybe a video will get me some feedback on some of the questions that I have. Before we dive into this, and I will go through it on the emulator really quickly, but I just wanted to outline what my goals were here. You can see the colors are very bland, and that's kind of on purpose. I just went to the Material Design Color Palette suggestion website, grabbed kind of a greeny palette and plugged that in and didn't look back, because I can spend weeks and weeks on look and feel stuff, and I wanted to focus a lot more on the Java and the actual code on this one because I had some ambitious plans for how I was going to approach this. And my goals here were to provide the user with the capability to select their question set. And so you'll notice here on the bottom, we've got an easy, medium, and hard option, and the questions are drastically different depending on which one you pick. So that was goal number one, is to give the user some variability there. Goal number two was to, instead of using something like a scroll layout, to have a single layout that becomes dynamically updated as you progress through the quiz. So that was goal number two. Goal number three was, at the end of the quiz, on the screen it will show you how many points were possible, how many points you got, what your percentage was, but I also wanted to give you the capability to email yourself a detailed breakdown of what each one of the questions was, what your answer was, what the correct answer should have been, that type of thing, so that if you got a lower score than you expected, then you can have some feedback about what the answers I was expecting in the quiz. And then the last goal here, and this was one of the requirements, was to be able to handle screen rotation elegantly. And in order to do that, because I'm not using a scroll layout, I had to create landscape versions of each one of my layouts. And that was much more complicated than I had expected, because when you rotate the screen, it destroys your app and rebuilds it, and so all of the variables that my app relies on get wiped. And so I had to figure out how to conserve them, and I did, thankfully, but it took me a lot of Googling and a lot of trial and error. So those were my goals. With that, let's go through this really quick. On this initial screen, there's some edit text views that ask for your name and your email, which are then used at the end of the quiz to be able to generate that email back to you. We'll just do this really quick. And this is my actual email. Please don't send me spam. And like I said, on screen rotation here, this would all get squished up because the buttons are down on the bottom. But if I rotate it, it sticks the buttons on the side here instead. So you can either go through in portrait or landscape mode, and the app should be able to handle it just fine. We're going to go through the easy version, and just, like I said really quickly, as opposed to being all one column, now it splits it into two columns, and I hope maximizes screen real estate here. But we'll just go through the app really quick in portrait mode. So we have effectively switched from the initial layout now to the activity main layout, and each one of these views dynamically pulls text from arrays that I have configured, and we'll go into that a little bit more later, but very quickly, because like I said, the last video I made was 20 minutes long. So we'll blast through this really quick. This is obviously a radio button view group. Same here. Now, this is a free text question. This is a multiple choice checkbox question. And then back to a radio group. And each one of my questionnaires right now is only 5 questions long, but I made both my Java and my layouts able to receive more questions than that. And so if, as a administrator, you wanted to make all of the quizzes 10 questions long, all you would have to do is go into the array resource and then add those questions, question types, options, and answers to the arrays, and then my Java will be able to handle that, and it'll go as long as you want it to go. But right now they all only go out to 5 questions. And then when we hit next question now we switch to the final layout, where it gives you your possible score, the score you received, your percentage, and then you can hit try again, which will wipe all of the variables and take you back to the beginning. Or you can hit the email me my score breakdown, which is what I had mentioned was one of my goals. And then this will queue up an email to the email address that you defined. I don't know why it's not letting me scroll up, but to that email that you defined. And then it'll go through each of the questions, what the question was, what your answer was, what the correct answer was, so on and so forth. So that is the really quick version of my app. We'll go back to the beginning. The only variables that are conserved are your name and your email, because chances are those haven't changed in the 30 seconds it took you to take the quiz. And there it is. So I do have all of my code out on GitHub, and you're welcome to dig through it. I don't think it's a good idea to go through all of it right now because it takes a long time. So I'm just going to focus on the bits that caused me trouble. And I guess I'll go over the basic function, how this works. And so here in my array XML, I had done a previous project where I defined all my arrays in my Java, and it just made my Java sort of unruly at the top there. So this time around, I learned about array resources. So here, each one of these is an array that can be grabbed and pulled into the Java. So this is the question array, the types, the options that should be presented to the end user for each question, and then the answers. So in this case, the first question, and I immediately kind of threw away key 0 on each one of these because I wanted it to be the same as the question. As the question variable increments, I want it to be directly applicable to the key for each one of these arrays. So since you start at question 1, I wanted the array to start at 1. So I just threw away key 0, and right now I have the number of questions in the array, but it doesn't really matter. It could just be null. Anyway, in this first one, here's the question, here's the type of question, so it's a single choice. Here are the options that should be presented to the end user, and then here's the actual answer. So back in my Java, where is that? Right here, I go grab the arrays out of my resource and then populate my array variables here. And it's dynamic, so depending on the difficulty that you selected, it'll go grab the appropriate difficulty here. So medium, easy, medium, or hard. So that's how that works really quick. Also, we're just defining our objects one time, theoretically, unless you're rotating the screen a whole bunch. But let's get into that a little bit. So this is something that took me a lot of trial and error. But like I said, on rotate, your app is destroyed and rebuilt. And so a lot of these variables, like my arrays, are really important, especially if you're in the middle of your quiz and you rotate it. You don't want to lose all of that progress. The app just dies. And so I overrode on-save instance state and then saved all of the important variables into my bundle. And then here on create, I rebuild the state and reinitialize all of those variables with the values that were stored into my bundle. And this works. I don't know if this is the right way to go about it, but it works. So if anybody has any feedback on that or anything that I could have done differently here, I am all ears. The other bit, and this is the one that I really have questions about. I'm going to reset my app here. On my initial layout, I have these two edit text views that store the name and the email. And when you click a button, you can initiate a method via the onClick attribute. And so that's easy enough. When I hit easy, and in fact it does this in the code if you look, when I hit easy it'll go find the text that you entered in each one of these views and then save it off to those variables, and then those variables are included in my bundle here if you rotate the screen, and everything gets conserved and everything's good. But there, as far as I know, there isn't anything analogous to that onClick attribute in an edit text view. And so I had no idea how to get the text entered here to save off to a variable, so that if on this initial layout you rotate the screen, we can preserve what you had entered on the screen and not make you have to re-enter it, especially if you have a long name like mine. So I looked all over Google, and there are a lot of differing opinions on how to handle this, but it looked like the one that was pretty common was to set up listeners. And so that's what I did. Here on create, we invoke this method, which is right down here. And it's listening for the action done action. And if it receives that action, then it will save off the text entered in that edit text view to my variable, which then is stored in my bundle, which then will conserve the data entered on screen rotate. The tricky bit here, though, is this action done is a very limited action. There's more than one way to progress between edit text views here. So if I come in here and I type my name, action done corresponds with clicking this little check mark here. And so if I do that, then great. Now if I rotate the screen, it'll conserve that value because it's stored it off to my username value and stuffed it in the bundle there. Unfortunately, though, you can also move to the next field via, say, tab, or I guess on an actual device you could just, click into the next field. And now I didn't hit the action done button here, and so this I don't believe was saved off to my variable, and if I rotate I think it'll revert back to John. So this is one of my outstanding questions here that I could really use some feedback on for those of you who have done this type of thing before. What are the best methods for an edit text view to be able to, as you go, dynamically save off the text that is entered into that edit text view into a variable so that it can be conserved on screen rotation? Is there some way, like as you're typing in that field, to every new character that's added, save that off to a variable? Or are there additional actions that I should be including in my listener code? I'm not really sure. So that's an outstanding question that I have for all of you guys. Beyond that, I'm not going to go through all of the code, but basically, this is the bit on create, and then if the configuration's changed, it calls this method here, which determines based on the phase of the quiz, if you're in the initial and the quiz phase or the final phase, the various objects that need to be defined and the layout and the views that need to be populated is all contained here. And yeah, I could have made a method here, but it's only called in one of two places, and I didn't feel like making a bunch of different methods for those. When you click easy, medium, or hard button here, it sets the user info, so it grabs the user info, sets those variables, and also gives you a toast if you don't input that information. I don't know if I showed that yet, but if you try to advance into the questionnaire without having entered this, it'll give you a little toast that says it's required, and then it'll build the questionnaire. This is where kind of the meat of my app is. So it'll populate all those arrays. I think I showed you this here. It will determine your layout, or determine your orientation, give you the correct layout. It'll define all those objects so that we don't have to redefine them every time we call them, and then it'll set the question display. Set question display looks at the array, mostly looks at that question type array, and then makes visible the appropriate view. So in my activity main, all of the views are there. So the edit text view is there. The radio button views are there. The checkbox views are there, but they're all set to visibility gone. And so you can't access them or do anything with them. And then as you increment through the quiz, as question increments anyway, then we're making them visible when it's appropriate. So if it's a free text question, then make that particular view visible and allow the user to interact with it. And then as you increment through, every time you click the next question button, it sets all those views back to gone, and it's because that's assumed to be the default state of the views. So that's how that works. Each time you increment, it checks the answers that you inputted and dynamically maintains a score count. And then at the end here, it tallies up your score and displays that to the screen. And then in reset quiz, it deletes all those variables and sends you back to that initial layout. And then here's the creation of the body of the email, which I'm sure there are a lot of things here like, yes, this could be a switch statement. I should probably redo that, and will eventually. But right now, there's a big mess of code that dynamically builds the body of your email, and then here's the intent that actually creates that email. And that's basically it. I don't think I did anything else too fancy here. I used gradients for my views, that really just go from a transparent to a non-transparent color and then throw a border around it so that they pop a little bit. I like the border and the rounded edges. Beyond that, I don't think I did too much else. And so, yay, I kept this one to 15 minutes instead of 20. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I would love to hear your thoughts on the best way to handle these edit text views and dynamically saving off that information to variables. And hopefully your courses are all going well as well. Thanks.